My name is Avery Sinclair. I'm 34 years old, a decorated officer in the United States Navy, and I've spent my life breaking barriers where few women have dared to step. I thought I had endured every storm imaginable. I thought betrayal had revealed its cruelest face to me. I was wrong, worthless soldier. My father's voice ripped through the chamber, sharp as a gunshot, shattering the air like glass. Every head turned. Every eye pierced me. The tribunal hall seemed to shrink around me, pressing against my chest, and for a brief moment, I felt like the world itself was judging me. My father, a retired colonel whose chest gleamed with medals and whose reputation was untouchable, stood on the witness stand, pointing a finger at me like I was a stranger, an intruder in my own life. "Take off that uniform, now." His voice trembled. He tried to hide it, but it was there. The tremor betrayed more than anger. It betrayed a lifetime of fractured love, expectations unmet, and a bitterness I had once thought I understood. The judge's eyes narrowed, pens froze mid-scribble, and even the steady hum of the air conditioning felt like a distant whisper. I could feel the heat in my chest, the familiar sting of shame, but not the kind that comes from believing his words. No. I had survived battles that would have broken lesser people. I had paid my dues in blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. The humiliation came from deeper than mere words. It came from the man who had once shown me how to stand tall, aim true, and survive when the world seemed bent on destroying me, now trying to dismantle my existence in front of strangers. I could feel the scars beneath my ribs, reminders of a mission that nearly claimed my life, throbbing with every heartbeat. The room smelled of old wood, cold metal, and the faint tang of tension. My throat tightened. My fingers shook, but I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. The chair screeched beneath me as I rose. I let the silence stretch, thick and suffocating, letting every eye linger, let every whisper of doubt hang in the air. I could hear the echoes of the jungle, the chaos, the blood, the heat, the fear, but this time, the battle was different. This time, the enemy wore the face of someone I once called father. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the trembling of my fingers as I reached for the buttons on my dress blues. Every movement was meticulous, calculated. Every unbuttoned seam was a silent defiance. The tribunal seemed to hold its collective breath. The world had slowed down to watch. And as I slid my jacket from my shoulders, letting it fall to the floor, the room shifted. The weight of their judgment hung heavier for a moment, but I stood taller than ever. My undershirt clung to me, damp with tension, but I didn't falter. I didn't flinch. I was Avery Sinclair, survivor, warrior, and no words, no tribunal, no betrayal could strip that away. And in that suspended silence, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I wasn't just fighting my father's scorn anymore. I was stepping into a war I hadn't anticipated. A war that would test not just my loyalty, but my very identity in ways I was only beginning to understand. I pulled the fabric of my uniform, just enough to let the truth speak for me. Gasps erupted across the chamber. The scars along my ribs were jagged, cruel, twisting like scorched ropes against pale, unbroken skin. Beneath them, two stubborn fragments of metal, remnants the surgeons couldn't safely remove, protruded like silent witnesses to the fire I had walked through. They had become part of me, permanent as my heartbeat. Admiral Caldwell was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually crisp and commanding, faltered, a crack betraying the weight of what he saw. He rose slowly from his seat, eyes locking onto mine as if he were seeing me for the first time, not as an officer, not as a soldier, but as someone who had survived hell and returned carrying pieces of it beneath her skin. My father, Colonel Sinclair, staggered backward, his face drained of color, his fury evaporating, replaced by something fragile, raw, fear, shame, and a regret that had nowhere to hide. His lips parted, searching for words, but none came. His own accusations had struck harder than any bullet. He sank back into his chair, eyes fixed on the floor, as though it could swallow him whole. I stood there, exposed, but unbroken. Let them see. Let them understand what reports and medals could never convey. These scars were not trophies. They were the proof of every agonizing mile I had crawled, every teammate I had dragged through mud, every moment I had refused death itself. The room froze. Tribunal judges hovered over pens, hesitant to break the sacred tension. Silence became heavier than any verdict they could render. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered my shirt and fastened my jacket. My hands were steady now, my movements controlled. When I spoke, my voice was calm, icy, honed by years of unspoken pain. "You call me useless," I said softly, turning to my father. "But I survived a mission no one else was meant to survive. I carried men twice my size, from a jungle that should have claimed me. I fought not for medals, not for recognition, but for lives. For people who trusted me with theirs." His shoulders sagged, he looked smaller, older, diminished under the weight of his own venomous words. He couldn't meet my eyes. I let the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate, before continuing. My mind flashed back to that night, the jungle ablaze with gunfire, smoke suffocating the air, screams of men I refused to abandon. Every step felt like it might be my last. The pain in my ribs had been so acute. I thought I might collapse before extraction, but I didn't. I kept moving, because someone had to, because I was trained to survive. The tribunal watched me like a ghost. They knew the mission in papers, in summaries, but they had never witnessed the betrayal, the chaos, the trap we had been sent into, nor the blood and terror that had shaped that night. Those scars were proof, evidence that I had endured, that I had returned, and that I had refused to be erased. I let my gaze sweep across the chamber, steady, unwavering. How can a father call his daughter useless, when her very body tells a story he never had the courage to hear? My words were for him, yes, but for every officer, every judge in that hall. I was asserting my existence, my survival, my truth. Admiral Caldwell cleared his throat, voice low but firm. "Lieutenant Sinclair, we need your side of the story." I straightened my jacket and stepped forward. If they wanted the truth, they would have it. All of it. Starting with the night I should have died. The tribunal adjourned in a haze of whispers and uneasy glances, but Admiral Caldwell's eyes never left me. He approached with measured steps, expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Sinclair," he said quietly. "Come with me." His tone brooked no refusal. I followed him down a corridor, lined with portraits of men who had built their reputations on valor. I wondered how many of their scars were hidden beneath the polish of medals and uniforms. How many stories had been buried in the pursuit of appearances. The private room was stark, walls steel gray, a single table at its center, with a notepad resting like an awaiting witness. Caldwell gestured for me to sit and took his place across from me, hands flat on the table. "I need the truth," he said, low and steady, "everything that really happened out there." My breath caught. Truth had a way of cutting deeper than any bullet, of exposing the parts of you never knew could bleed again. But I was ready. For the first time, I would not hide. I would tell everything, the mission, the betrayal, the moments that had nearly claimed me, and the choices I had made that night that defined who I had become. Deeper than any bullet, deeper than any wound, the memory of that night clawed at me. I had rehearsed my answers for months, anticipating every skeptical gaze, every attempt to reduce my survival to mere luck. Yet with Admiral Caldwell's eyes boring into mine, the weight of that night came crashing back all at once, as if I were back in the suffocating jungle, each gunshot echoing in my chest. Before I could speak, my father's voice pierced my mind, sharp and unyielding, just as it had when I was 12. "Don't turn failure into an excuse, Avery. A soldier either accomplishes the mission or dies trying." His words had been etched into me, shaping every stride I took, every risk I embraced. Bruises, blood, exhaustion, impossible odds, none of that mattered. Success was the only currency of worth in his eyes. I almost died, I said finally, voice steady but raw, carrying the tremor of memories I could never fully shake. The operation we were sent on, it was doomed from the start. We were told it would be a quiet extraction, no resistance, no danger. My fingers tightened against the edge of the table, nails digging into my palms. But the jungle, it wasn't just unprepared. It wasn't mere bad intel. It felt deliberate, like we were led into a trap. Caldwell's gaze sharpened, a flicker of understanding and concern crossing his face. Go on, he urged. His tone was both commanding and curious, probing the gaps between the lines of the official report. Something doesn't add up, Lieutenant Sinclair. Tell me what's missing. I inhaled slowly, summoning the calm I had honed through years of impossible missions. Almost everything that truly happened, I said, voice low, precise, deliberate. The report says we deployed at 2100 hours, but I remember checking my watch as we were airlifted in. Our boots hit the ground at 2035. Someone tampered with the timeline, erasing nearly 30 crucial minutes. Caldwell's brow furrowed. 30 minutes? That's not a clerical error. What else? I hesitated, the memory of pain clawing at the edges of my resolve. But I couldn't hold back, not anymore. We were supposed to have secondary support, a remote tracking team to relay intel as we advanced. 5 minutes in, their signal vanished. No updates, no coordinates, nothing. They were gone. A shadow crossed Caldwell's expression, his fist pressed to the table, knuckles whitening. That's not in the report, he muttered, almost to himself. No, sir, I confirmed. The official account mentions the ambush, my courage under fire, but it doesn't explain why we walked straight into a kill zone. No warning, no backup, nothing makes sense, not the missing support, not the broken intel, not the 30 minutes someone removed from the record. The room seemed to constrict, as if the truth itself had weight, suffocating us. I kept my eyes on Caldwell's, searching for any flicker of recognition, or perhaps for the clue that someone else had engineered this disaster. I wish I could give you clear answers, I admitted. Softer now, even I don't fully understand how everything went so wrong. All I know is it felt deliberate, like someone wanted us to fail. Caldwell leaned back, eyes narrowing, mind racing. Then we'll start by finding out who rewrote your mission before you even set foot on that ground, he said, voice icy with resolve. Silence settled between us, more piercing than any interrogation. Lieutenant, he continued, slower now, words measured, careful. This is beginning to look like more than bad intel. Someone wanted these details buried. His gaze sharpened, calculating, plotting. He tapped a finger against the table, twice, before leaning in. Do you know anyone who might have had access to your mission orders? I hesitated, memories of the day before deployment, surfacing with unwelcome clarity. My father had called me into his office, his expression unreadable, jaw clenched, eyes colder than usual. Not every order is meant to be questioned. Do what you're told, don't ask why, he had said. I don't know for certain, I admitted, my voice tight, but my father has connections. Old friends in advisory positions. One of them was on the approval board for that mission. His name, General Harris. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. Harris signed off on the operation logs. I nodded. My stomach twisted. Harris had known me since childhood, always boasting about my father's legacy. The sharp, unreadable look my father had given me before deployment suddenly made sense. Had he known? Had he suspected that this mission was anything but routine? I clenched my fists on the table, scar tissue beneath my ribs, aching as though echoing the pain of that night. Before I left for the jungle, my father had said, "Don't mess this up." That tone, it had carried a warning, a knowledge that something awaited me out there. And now, I was going to find out exactly what it was. If you want, I can take the next part, where Avery begins to trace the sabotage, uncover betrayal, and reveal the intense jungle mission in full, while keeping this suspenseful interrogation style flowing seamlessly into the action. Do you want me to continue that next? Absolutely. Here's the next part. Fully extended, hooking the listener as Avery begins uncovering the sabotage in the jungle mission. Caldwell leaned back, studying me with the quiet intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. Harris, he murmured, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. If he had access, then this was orchestrated from the very top. Someone didn't want you to succeed, Lieutenant, and they made sure of it. My stomach churned, a mixture of anger and cold dread. Every detail I'd suppressed for months rose to the surface. The chaos, the betrayal, the men who had trusted me with their lives. We were dropped into a death trap, I said, voice tight, every word measured. The ambush wasn't an accident. Every obstacle, every wrong turn, every piece of missing intel, it was deliberate. Someone wanted us to fail before the mission even began. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. And yet you survived. You brought them out. Every single one. How? I drew in a slow breath, reliving the night, as though it were happening all over again. Because I refused to leave them behind. Because I wasn't trained to give up. The jungle was alive, crawling with enemies we didn't even know were waiting. Our team was small, our support gone. We fought tooth and nail through the undergrowth. Every step a battle. Every breath a struggle. I carried men twice my size when they couldn't move, pulled them through mud and gunfire. I patched wounds with my bare hands. I made impossible choices, and I survived, but barely. Caldwell's fingers drummed against the table, and yet the official report, it's sanitized, clean, heroic. It omits the real danger, the betrayal, the timing discrepancies. Exactly, I said, voice sharp. It paints a story that's safe for the record, but it's not the truth, not the real truth. And the people responsible for rewriting it, they need to be held accountable. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a near whisper. Lieutenant, I need every detail, every step, every error, every sign that something was off. We're going to unravel this from the ground up. Someone tried to erase the real story of what happened that night, and you're the only one who can tell it. I nodded, the scars beneath my ribs aching with memory, but my resolve stronger than ever. I would give him the truth, all of it, every heartbeat, every bullet, every choice. And when this was over, those who had tried to bury the truth would see what it truly meant to survive. The jungle was unnervingly quiet. Then, without warning, it erupted like thunder breaking a clear sky. Automatic gunfire shredded the night, sharp and unrelenting, splintering the darkness into chaos. I hit the ground instinctively, my senses exploding as bullets shredded leaves and branches above me. Contact! Left flank! I shouted into the headset, my voice barely audible over the storm of gunfire. I caught sight of Kellen spin and collapse, his rifle clattering across the mud as a bullet tore into his shoulder. The acrid smell of burning metal mixed with the earthy scent of the jungle as mines detonated nearby, shaking the ground beneath us. Dirt and smoke exploded upward, stinging my eyes, crawling into my clothes, vibrating into my bones. I slid behind a fallen tree, breath ragged, every nerve screaming in alarm. Return fire! Find cover! I barked, signaling Alvarez and Diaz. The jungle had transformed into a symphony of chaos. Explosions, shouted commands, and the tearing whistle of bullets snapping past us. It was overwhelming, disorienting, as if we were trapped inside a glass room shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Every gunshot cut through my focus like a shard of ice. Ruiz, only a few feet behind me, gripped his side and screamed. Sparks flew from his radio pack, severing our final link to command. My cheek pressed to the damp earth, pulse hammering in my ears. Stay with me, I shouted, crawling toward him, mud-sucking at every movement, fingers slipping with every desperate reach. Bullets tore through the trees around us, splintering bark into jagged fragments that shredded my uniform and drew blood. We were pinned, surrounded by enemies who had clearly known we were coming. Every second stretched into eternity, every breath a gamble, every motion a test of survival. And yet, I couldn't freeze, not when they needed me, not when survival depended on me leading. A shot tore through the air so close I felt the heat graze my side. Then came the impact, white hot and sharp as lightning, as a fragment of shrapnel embedded itself in my ribs. My lungs burned, my breath knocked out of me. Wet warmth spread across my uniform. Pain screamed up my spine, freezing me momentarily. Then Ruiz's cry cut through the haze, raw, terrified, desperate. He lay exposed, bleeding, eyes wide, searching for me. I gritted my teeth, forcing my body to move. If I stopped even for a second, we were all dead. "Hold on, Ruiz," I shouted, my voice carrying over the chaos. My left arm trembled violently, but I gripped his vest and dragged him inch by agonizing inch behind the fallen tree that offered the only cover. The mud clung to us, each movement a battle against gravity itself. Diaz lay sprawled at the edge of the clearing, weapon just out of reach. Bullets buzzed overhead like angry hornets. I launched myself back into the fire, ignoring the white-hot pain in my ribs. My hands found his harness. I hauled him toward us, knees digging into wet earth, every pull a test of endurance. The ground erupted around us as rounds struck mere inches away, sending sprays of dirt and debris across my face. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Every ounce of my body screamed to give in, but the alternative, leaving them there, was unthinkable. Not for my team, not for myself. Each pull, each drag, each shuddering crawl through mud and blood-bound jungle was a reminder. Survival wasn't about luck, it was about will, and mine was unbreakable. When I finally dragged Diaz behind cover, I collapsed beside them for a fleeting second, vision swimming, lungs burning. "Stay low, stay with me," I rasped, voice shaking but firm, each word an anchor in the storm. Even as my own blood soaked into the mud beneath us, I knew there was no choice. Leadership wasn't optional. Survival meant keeping them alive, no matter the cost. The night blurred into a brutal montage of mud, blood, and desperate, shallow breaths. Ruiz and Diaz barely clung to consciousness, their faces pale masks of pain, yet I could not pause. Alvarez was alive, but badly shaken, gripping his bleeding arm as he struggled to reload his rifle. I grabbed his shoulder, my voice a low, iron-edged command. "We move, now." He nodded, pale and trembling, and I hoisted Ruiz first, slinging his arm over my shoulder. Pain screamed through my ribs, like knives being driven into bone. Every step was a battle against my own body. Dirt and blood filled my mouth, lungs burned with every intake of humid jungle air, and every rustle of leaves reminded me that we were still targets, still hunted. "Keep moving," I whispered, forcing Diaz and Alvarez to follow. Step by brutal step, I dragged Ruiz through underbrush thick with mud and hidden hazards. His weight threatened to crush me, but I refused to falter. 1 inch forward at a time, one agonizing crawl after another, I clawed through the night, ignoring every scream my body begged me to release. When we reached a patch of relative cover, I sank Ruiz down, sweat and blood mingling on my skin, then turned back for Diaz. He tried to protest, lips trembling. "You can't carry both of us," he whispered, panic and disbelief in his eyes. "Yes, I can," I shot back, gritting my teeth. No time for arguments. I gripped him under his arms, dragging him forward through muck and twisted roots, ignoring the white-hot agony in my ribs. Every movement was a calculated battle, every breath a gamble. My boots sank into the swampy ground, leaving a bloody trail marking our passage, yet stopping was impossible. By the time I reached Ruiz again, my arms shook violently, muscles trembling under the weight of fatigue and pain. "We're almost out," I told them, though even saying it aloud felt like a lie. Every inch of my body ached, bones screaming, ribs screaming, yet a stubborn, unyielding part of me refused to break. I would not let the jungle claim them, not tonight, not ever. And then, white. The chaos of the jungle vanished, replaced by sterile white light, the acrid scent of gunpowder, replaced by antiseptic, and the faint hum of hospital machinery. Monitors beeped rhythmically, a cruel mimicry of the heartbeat I had fought to preserve. My chest felt like it had been split open, every breath stabbing into raw nerve endings. Attempting to move triggered sharp agony that pinned me flat against the bed. A nurse appeared, voice gentle yet firm. "Lieutenant Sinclair, stay still, you're safe now. Completely safe. Safe." The word felt alien, impossible. My head turned slowly, and I saw the bandages wrapped tightly around my torso, faintly stained with dried blood. "Your injuries were severe," she continued, softer now, almost apologetic. "Two fragments of shrapnel are still lodged near your rib cage. Removing them could puncture your lungs. The doctors decided it's safer to leave them in place." Her words sank slowly, registering in fragments of disbelief. I traced my fingers over the hard, alien shapes, pressing beneath my skin. They were permanent, immovable, etched into my flesh, a reminder of that night, of the jungle, of fire and blood, and survival. Each pulse, each breath, carried the echo of ambush, like the jungle had branded me, marking me forever as someone who had endured, someone who had refused to die, when everything and everyone else had counted me out. A doctor entered, his expression unreadable, carrying charts and a clipboard. He paused at the edge of the bed, gaze lingering on the scars beneath my bandages. "You're lucky to be alive," he said simply, but luck had nothing to do with it. I had survived because I refused to fail anyone. Not Ruiz, not Diaz, not Alvarez, not even myself. And as I lay there, ribs aching, body exhausted, I realized something else. These fragments, these scars, they were more than reminders of pain. They were proof. Proof that I had walked through hell, guided by sheer will, and returned intact, unbroken, ready to face whoever or whatever had set this trap. The doctor entered, checking my vitals with a steady, unflinching gaze. He didn't soften the truth. "You lost a lot of blood," he said bluntly. "If your team hadn't gotten you out when they did, you wouldn't be here. But the damage is permanent. You'll heal, but those scars, they aren't going anywhere." Later, when I was alone, I lifted the edge of my bandage just enough to glimpse the brutal proof of that night. My ribs were marred, bruised, stitched with angry, jagged lines. My breath hitched. I pressed my hand against them, feeling the thrum of pain, the ache, the undeniable testimony of survival. These weren't just wounds, they were a story etched into my flesh, a silent record of everything we endured when no one believed we could. And in that sterile, white-lit room, I swore I would never let the truth of that night be erased. Weeks after the tribunal, when the noise of gossip and rumors began to fade, I sat alone in my quarters, sifting through reports that never told the full story. The mission was officially closed, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic language and sanitized lines. Yet the gnawing feeling that something or someone was lurking in the shadows refused to leave me. Late one night, my laptop pinged. A new email. The sender's name was a string of meaningless characters. The subject line read, "Look deeper into Orion Systems." I froze, hand hovering over the mouse. Orion Systems, one of the largest defense contractors tied to our South Pacific operations. I had seen their name on equipment manifests, encrypted communication relays, satellite feeds, but never questioned it. The email was simple, a single line. "Your mission was not a failure, it was a test." My pulse jumped. A test. The words hit me like a cold blade, cutting into the memory of that night. My breath quickened as I read the sentence again and again, each repetition making the implication more terrifying. There was a PDF attached, compressed and time-stamped to match the night of the ambush. I hesitated, scanning it carefully for security risks before opening. Inside were fragments of intercepted communications, lines of encrypted code, call logs, and what appeared to be satellite path data. Multiple entries referenced predictive drone mapping and the phrase live field variables. My stomach sank. It confirmed my worst suspicions. We hadn't stumbled into an ambush by accident. We were being monitored, studied, our suffering orchestrated as part of some larger clinical experiment. The room felt suffocating, the sterile air pressing down as I leaned back in my chair. My eyes met the framed photo of my team. Ruiz, Kellen, Diaz, faces still haunting me in quiet moments. Was our blood just data to them? The realization hit like a physical blow. If Orion Systems had manipulated our mission, then every wrong turn, every missing support team, every delayed extraction, it had been deliberate. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an unlisted number. I answered cautiously, expecting silence or a wrong number. Instead, Admiral Foster's voice came through, low, deliberate, carrying the weight of authority, and something else, urgency. "Lieutenant Sinclair," he said, the words slow, measured. "We need to talk. Now." Lieutenant Sinclair, we need to talk. Not here. Not on record. Observation deck. 1 hour. There was no room for hesitation. I arrived early, scanning the quiet, dimly lit space as the city lights glinted off the glass walls. Shadows stretched across the floor, and then he stepped out from the darkness. Admiral Foster, his face taut with concern, the weight of unspoken truths pressing around him. "You've been digging," he said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "And I think you've found something I've been trying to confirm." I pulled up the encrypted file on my phone, showing him fragments of intercepted logs, call records, and satellite traces. Someone inside this chain of command knew exactly what would happen that night, I said, voice low but steady. The ambush, it wasn't just bad intel, it was staged. Orion Systems was watching us every step of the way. Foster studied the screen for a long moment, his jaw tightening. "This confirms my suspicions," he muttered. "There's a leak somewhere high up. Someone greenlit a mission they knew would fail, and then buried the evidence. Your team, you were bait, Avery." The words hit like a hammer to my chest, though a part of me had already suspected it. "Do you think my father knew?" I asked quietly, hiding the tremor in my voice. Foster hesitated. "I don't know, but Harris, your father's old friend, was on the final approval board for this operation. If there's a thread to pull, it starts with him." The thought made my stomach twist. Harris, the man who had given me my first Navy Challenge coin, now tied to this betrayal. My hands clenched. If someone's on the inside, we expose them. I won't let my team's suffering be a footnote. Foster nodded. "Then we work quietly. No one knows, no one suspects, until there's nowhere left for them to hide." 2 nights later, as I combed through the encrypted files again, a new message appeared in my secure inbox. The sender identified himself only as former Orion engineer. My heart pounded as I opened the email. There was a single audio file attached, labeled Test Drone Debrief. I plugged in my headphones, pressing play with a mixture of dread and grim curiosity. A man's voice, shaky but urgent, filled my ears. "If you're hearing this, you need to know the truth. Orion Systems used your unit as a live experiment. They were testing a predictive drone system designed to map ambush responses in real time. Your mission, it wasn't compromised by chance. It was orchestrated." I froze, bile rising. The voice continued, breaking under the weight of guilt. "When we saw casualties, some of us objected. We were told it was data. Losses were acceptable. Collateral for progress. That's when I quit. I couldn't live with what we'd done." I stopped the recording, sitting in stunned silence, my hands trembling. Our suffering hadn't just been ignored, it had been engineered. The faces of Ruiz, Kellen, Diaz flashed in my mind, and for the first time in months, tears burned my eyes. I forwarded the file to Foster, adding a single line, "This changes everything." Minutes later, his call came. "This is the proof we needed," he said, voice grim, resolute. "Orion turned your mission into a weapons test. This isn't just a cover-up, Avery. This is criminal." I closed my laptop, fists clenched, a surge of something sharper than fear coursing through me. Anger. It was raw, unyielding, and for the first time since that jungle, I felt alive with purpose. I needed answers no file or report could give. I drove to my father's house, the same place where he had once drilled his impossible expectations into me. He opened the door, surprise flashing across his features, just as it always did when I appeared unannounced. "Dad," I said, voice sharper than intended, "we need to talk." We sat in his study, a room filled with medals, framed commendations, and photos of him shaking hands with generals and politicians. Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I leaned forward, hands on the polished desk. "How deep were you involved with the group that signed off on my mission? Did you know Harris was part of it? Did you know what Orion Systems was doing?" My voice cracked, but I held my ground. He stiffened, gaze drifting to the bookshelf. "This isn't the place for accusations," he said, slowly. "It's not an accusation if it's true." I shot back. "You've been friends with Harris for decades. Did you know they used my team as test subjects?" He stood, walking to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "War isn't clean," he muttered. "Decisions are made, compromises, things we can't undo." "That's not an answer," I pressed. "Did you know?" His silence was heavier than any denial. He didn't turn to face me, just sighed. Long, low, carrying guilt I could feel but not name. I finally stood to leave. "I'll find the truth, with or without you," I said. He didn't stop me, didn't offer a single word. The unanswered questions followed me out like shadows, heavier than the scars on my ribs. Foster wasted no time. Within 48 hours of receiving the engineer's recording, a quiet, targeted internal investigation began. I was called to his office the next morning. His expression was firm, but there was a glimmer of hope. "We found discrepancies in the mission authorizations," he said. "Two officers in the chain of command, Commander Lee and Captain Morris, have been suspended pending review. Their signatures appear on altered data logs. This is our first real break, Avery." Relief washed over me like a wave I hadn't felt in months. For so long, I'd carried the weight of whispers, rumors, and suspicion, each one painting me as reckless or lucky. Now, for the first time, the truth was finally clawing its way out. Ruiz called that night, soft, grateful. "We knew you'd get to the bottom of it. You carried us then, and you're carrying this fight now." I smiled for the first time in weeks, fingers tracing the scars on my ribs. They weren't just proof of survival, they were symbols of persistence. For a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that justice was possible, but the calm didn't last. 3 days later, a storm arrived, not in the jungle, but on my phone. Notifications flooded in messages, articles, whispers, headlines screamed, "Lieutenant Sinclair under investigation, hero or liability, reckless operator endangers squad." Orion Systems was striking back. They had the resources, the reach, and every reason to discredit me before Foster's investigation could go further. Carefully constructed narratives painted me as unstable, reckless, a soldier led by emotion rather than strategy. Reading it was like watching my honor bleed in slow motion. I slammed my laptop shut, heart racing. I called Foster. "They're trying to bury me," I said, voice tight. "They're rewriting the story." "I know," he replied, calm but firm. "Stay steady. This is exactly what they want. Panic, distraction. We fight this with evidence, not emotions." But whispers had already started at the base itself. In the mess hall, 2 junior officers spoke openly. "Isn't she the one who got her squad slaughtered?" I walked past without a word, spine straight. Betrayal stung like fire, but I couldn't afford distraction. Orion wasn't just protecting secrets, they were trying to destroy me, and the hardest blow came from the man who should have had my back, my father. "I need to speak," he said, his voice breaking the stillness. All eyes turned to him, my pulse quickening as I watched him grip the edge of the table for support. "I signed the Orion contract," he admitted, each word heavy, measured. Years ago, I believed it was strictly a simulation program, a tool for training exercises. I never imagined, his voice faltered, the sentence trailing as the weight of reality settled into the room. I never imagined it would be used on live missions. The room was utterly silent. Every council member, every observer, every officer present seemed suspended in a moment that would redefine their understanding of loyalty, trust, and betrayal. My father's gaze dropped again, avoiding mine. But I could feel it. The tremor in his hands, the strain in his shoulders, the first crack in a man who had always seemed unshakable. I swallowed, my voice low but unwavering. You entrusted lives to a system, to people you assumed would act responsibly. And because of that trust, my team walked into a trap. He nodded slowly, each movement a confession he could not retract. Talia, I was wrong. I see that now. I see the cost. I clenched my fists, feeling the old anger rising, tempered now by something sharper, grief, betrayal, and the impossibly heavy weight of truth. Wrong isn't enough, Father. They died because someone treated the battlefield like a laboratory. Whether intentionally or out of blind faith, you opened that door. The chair at the head of the council cleared its throat, a subtle reminder that the room was more than just family confrontation. It was justice in motion. My father's eyes finally met mine, wide, vulnerable, and raw with shame. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said quietly, voice breaking. I thought I was protecting lives. You protected nothing but secrets, I replied, each syllable sharp, controlled. And now, it's time those secrets are exposed. A heavy silence fell again, but this time it was charged, electric. My father lowered his head, shaking as if trying to physically bear the weight of every life lost that night. And then, slowly, deliberately, he straightened. The tremor in his hands remained, but there was a resolve in his eyes I had never seen before. I will testify, he said. I will stand and answer for my decisions, for the lives lost, for Orion, the council members murmured, some nodding, others exchanging stunned glances. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension in my shoulders ease just slightly. Truth had finally pierced the armor. Evidence had opened the doors, but it was courage that kept them from being slammed shut. I stepped back, letting the room take in the weight of the moment. My father, once my harshest judge, had chosen accountability over pride, and for the first time in years, I saw the man he might have been if honesty had always been his compass. The preliminary findings were clear, the path forward set, but even as relief seeped in, I knew this was not the end. There would be battles yet to come, battles against those who would resist the truth, against the shadows that had manipulated every step of Operation Hallard. I turned away from the podium, my eyes sweeping the room one last time. The scars on my ribs ached, a reminder of the jungle, the ambush, the cost of survival. But today, those scars, our scars, were proof that we had endured, that the truth could not be buried forever, and that even in the face of betrayal, courage still mattered. And somewhere deep inside, I felt the first flicker of something I had long denied, hope that admission hung in the air, like a detonator's final click. The polished veneer of authority cracked, revealing a man suddenly very human, cornered, guilty, and desperate. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said, his tone almost pleading, "there's context you don't understand. The operation, the context." I cut in, my voice steady, sharper than I had expected. "The context is that my team was treated as expendable. The context is that you ran a live experiment on soldiers without consent. The context is that men died because your algorithms needed data. That's the context. And it's unforgivable." A murmur of agreement, or shock, swept through the council. Some members were scribbling notes frantically. Others leaned back, exchanging grim, astonished glances. Admiral Foster's eyes bore into the Orion representative, steel cutting through the residual arrogance. There is no excuse, not corporate expediency, not progress, not a single line in a memo, Foster said, voice low but cutting. Lives were put at risk. Full accountability is required. The defense lawyer opened his mouth, then shut it again, as if words had abandoned him. The weight of the memo, paired with the evidence I had presented, left him cornered in a way no rehearsed argument could recover from. I let my gaze sweep the room, pausing on my father in the back row. His hands were no longer clenched into fists. Instead, they rested on his knees, trembling slightly, eyes glistening but resolute. For the first time in decades he seemed to fully grasp the cost of his decisions, and the silent apology behind every line he had ever drawn. I took a slow breath, letting the anger pulse through me without controlling me. We propose immediate suspension of all Orion field testing programs, until this council establishes oversight protocols, I said, letting each word hit its mark, and we request criminal review of all parties involved in authorizing live testing on active combat units. Not speculation, not suggestions, review and prosecution. The room was silent for several long beats. Then slowly council members began nodding. Some whispered agreements to one another. The defense representatives exchanged glances, faces paling. It was clear the tide had shifted and the scales of accountability were finally tipping. Finally, the ethics chairwoman leaned forward. Her gray eyes locked on me. "Lieutenant Morgan," she said, her voice firm but approving, "your testimony, evidence, and proposed safeguards will be submitted to the full Military Oversight Committee. This council recognizes that the integrity of our armed forces depends on transparency, accountability, and human life taking precedence over corporate expedience." I exhaled slowly, my ribs aching beneath the uniform, my hands trembling slightly. The battle in the jungle had been brutal, but the fight here, the fight for truth, for justice, was far from over. And yet, for the first time in months, a cautious surge of hope pushed through the lingering anger. Today, the soldiers who had been used, betrayed, and abandoned were no longer voiceless. Today, their story, and my scars, were proof that even in a world built on secrecy and manipulation, accountability could still be demanded. The Orion representative slumped back in his chair, defeated, the veneer of control shattered. And somewhere in the room, I allowed myself a quiet, fleeting thought: the jungle had not broken me. Neither had the lies, the betrayal, or the scars. And now, armed with evidence and truth, I would make sure no one else's sacrifice could ever be ignored. Later, as the cadets filed out, some stopping to thank me, some simply bowing their heads in quiet respect, I lingered by the window. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the academy grounds in gold and shadow. My hand brushed against the scars on my ribs, still tender but no longer just a reminder of pain. They were a testament to endurance, to truth, and to the power of standing firm when everything around you demanded silence. The letter from my father, the hearing's verdict, the reform I had fought for, they were all milestones, but none of them erased the nights in the jungle, the weight of loss, or the faces of those who couldn't speak for themselves. What they did do was transform that weight into something I could carry with purpose. I closed my journal, the pen resting atop the page where I had written, "The scars don't define me, but they remind me of the cost of silence." Standing there, I realized the fight wasn't just over Orion, or the betrayal, or even my father's blind trust. It was over the kind of leadership I would leave behind. Every cadet who left that room carried a piece of what I had learned: courage, accountability, and the unyielding refusal to let human life become a statistic. And as the last rays of sunlight faded across the academy grounds, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: scars are not the end of a story, they are the beginning of the next chapter. The chapter where the lessons of the past shape the guardians of the future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to write it, recognition, but with the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, My scars were finally speaking for something bigger than me. As the applause settled, I caught sight of a figure standing quietly at the back of the auditorium. My breath caught when I recognized him. My father, out of uniform wearing a simple gray coat, but those broad shoulders, the ones that had once cast such a long shadow over my life, were unmistakable. His eyes, usually sharp and unyielding, were softer now, almost fragile. I stepped down from the podium, my heartbeat drumming in my ears. He didn't move at first, unsure if he had the right to approach. When I finally walked toward him, he straightened, hands clasped tightly, and I saw something I had never seen before, tears glistening in his eyes. "I came to listen," he said, his voice rough but sincere, "not to speak. I had to hear you for myself. And Talia, I was wrong. All of it, the things I said, the way I doubted you. I thought I was protecting you by being hard, but I see now I was just protecting my own pride." The words hit me like a wave, not because they erased the pain, but because they carried the weight of a man who had finally stopped running from his mistakes. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I don't need you to be proud of me," I whispered. "I just needed you to believe me." He nodded, jaw trembling. "I do. I believe you. I believe in you, more than I ever have, and I will spend whatever time I have left, making sure I never fail you again." For a moment, the noise of the room faded, and it was just the two of us. No tribunal, no accusations, no scars, except the ones that had brought us here. He reached out, hesitant, and I let him rest a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first step toward something better, peace with the man who once defined my world. The hallway outside the Naval Academy's memorial wing was quiet, almost sacred. My boots echoed softly against the polished floor as I walked past bronze plaques, honoring those who had given everything. I slowed at the newest section, where my name was etched alongside my team's, not as a monument to death, but as a testament to survival. I traced my fingers over the cool metal and reflected on how, for so long, I believed my scars were invisible. Now, they were part of a story no one could erase. I placed a hand over my ribs, feeling the faint ridges beneath my uniform, and whispered, "Some scars burn, but mine speak louder than any silence." The thought settled like a quiet flame. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about legacy. The voices of those who never came back would live on through every cadet I trained, every lesson I shared. The Callahan Clause had just been signed into military doctrine, and I felt the weight of that change like a promise made to them all. As I left the hallway, the sunset spilled through tall glass windows, casting golden light across the academy grounds. The world seemed to breathe again. I took one last look at the plaque and walked forward, head held high, chest steady. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? A quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read every one with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing, not just to hear more stories like this, but to join a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.